At the same moment, the blindfolded was removed from the man's eyes and the gag was pulled out of his mouth. One of the guards took out his knife from the pocket and cut the ropes around his waist and stood still with his arm behind the back. They gasped, his hand was flying in his mouth as he saw Jungguk blinking his eyes to adjust according to the sunlight. They didn't waste any other second and ran toward. As fast as he could, Cook, they screamed in ecstasy as well as fear and wrapped his arms around his neck before even he could comprehend what was going on. My God, they breathed, cupping the back of his neck as he nestled his face in his neck. They, Jungguk shock whispered, pierced through the air. Theon, he claimed and wrapped his arm around. They let out a cry and relief, particularly to him, and dog barely touched the ground. You okay? He breathed in relief. I'm okay. They mumbled and pulled back slightly to see if that man had injured him. They explained his face and found no. Are you fine? They still asked and Jungkook clapped at his mom for mocking and embraced them once again. I was so worried. His breath was quick and he placed a kiss on the hair and trailed down to his cheeks. Thank God. Me too. These small hands were rested on both of his jaw. Fingerprint would reach the neck and they stared up at him. I'm so glad you're okay. They blinked back at the deer and smiled at him. I'm fine. Everyone is okay. He touched his forehead with hymns and gave their tiny smile. I do not like rejections. He said he didn't want any surprise. They turned around in Jungkook's arm and looked at the man who was barely 2 feet away from them. They didn't answer him and felt Jungkook hold on his torso. They struggled against him and gave him a cold eye. I will not let you hurt him, they said in determination. Alex raised an amused eyebrow and shook his head. I won't need your permission for that. He sneered. You can't hurt him. They raised his voice and it came out shrill. Even Jungguk cringed behind him. At that, you have to reunite with your Prince Charming. I want you both to say goodbye. No, it was Jungkook who spoke, forcing Tae behind him, but Tae stubbornly remained standing in front of him. Are you going to take him? The lower lip was trembling, thinking that he had something bad, a torture room where he would hurt Jungkook. That he raised his finger. You don't need to know. He gave their tight smile. They shook his head and grabbed Jungkook's hand in his and intertwined their finger. Don't take him, they pleaded. Please, if you take him, I will go with you. Jungkook snapped, jerking Tae by his side. A low growl was snapped their head in Alex's direction as he was gliding at Jungkook. He crawled. They stepped in front of Jungkook before he could say anything and stared at Alex pleadingly. He gave their glove for a few seconds before breaking at this man. Them to the grand room. He shouted and turned his back to them. What is all this? Jungkook murmured in his ear, not understanding the man toward his wife. They looked at him and shook his head. Later, they mumbled and rested his head on his shoulder. Jungkook slipped his hand inside the pocket, and that made him go inside that place. He didn't like to come to this place, but he had no other choice. He couldn't find Jungkook for the past 3 hours, and it worried him. This was the kind of place he would imagine come, or even passing by. By seeing that circumstance, he knew Jungkook had been taken by the Russians, and he had no other choice but to come here. He couldn't just sit there and wait for some miracle to happen, and he decided to take things in his own hand. Jungkook gave a slight nod to 2 men who greeted him and warmly took a seat in front of the table. How much? He said, like to beat around the bush. Were these people? Because something other than business could be dangerous. The man with silver eyes smirked and leaned forward. 3 million. Jungle let out a dry chuckle, picking up the piece of metal from the table in front of him. He let out an amused smile and examining that revolver in his hand. Is that a 3 million for this? He laughed and shook his head mockingly. The man named intertwined their finger and leaned forward at the table. And for a man, that was you're boring, he said coldly, smirking, and Jungkook stood up. $1 million and no more. Take it or leave it, he advised. The man shook his head and clanked his tongue, as well as standing up. You're the new to the boy. You don't know how to shoot this. I don't think you have much to choice, he said, and that snapped something inside Jungle. He twisted his arm behind the back, still holding the revolver, and shot 3 times. A satisfied smile lighted up his face when he heard that and peered behind him. The shocking face of the man gasped that there was fear in his eyes. You cannot be this good, only for 4 months of training, he blurted, seeing at then Jungkook's skills. Jungkook rolled his shoulder and twisted his way before looking at the man and shot. His leg was bleed with the thick red blood. You couldn't have killed him, he yelled. Jungkook tilted his head and gave him a smile. I could have, if I wanted to. He grinned at his horrified face. $1 million or? He said, flinching his eyes with the man's face, the gun in his own hand. Fine, $1 million, but I want my man back by tomorrow, he said to sound strict, but that of his voice gave him the fear. It pleased Jungkook, so he grinned and shrugged. I will try not to get them killed. He shrugged, and when the man opened his mouth to protest, he further added, Tell me, Carter, do you have a wife or any children? Jungkook inquired while touching the rear of that revolver. No, what did you ask? He said, and picked up the check that Jungkook had placed on the table a while ago. Any lovers? Jungkook lifted his eyes toward the man. Carter looked at him and then slowly nodded his head. Of course, what man won't? He said, and Jungkook gave a pleasant smile and signed out. Do you mean anything to them? Or is it just because of your money? He smirked. The man. They returned the smirk and chuckle. Of course it's money. Money is everything, brother. It speaks for every month. He winked, pleasant with the skill with the moment. How many people have you killed? Jungguk asked, pulling the hammer even so slowly that it clacked with that way. Carter eyes flinched the man, and then Jungkook's face. You know, Jungkook, his eyes flinched with uneasy. It pleased Jungkook to know that even though he was surrounded by the man, he was still afraid of Jungkook. Have you raised families? Jungkook asked, pointing to a gun at the closest one of his eyes to take a good Carter swallow and eyed the gun that was pointed toward his chest. He took a step back, then parted his lips at fear. What are you doing? He stumbled. Jungkook still closed on his eyes and lowered his gun that man's eyes. How many families? He asked, placing the thumb over the trigger. Sweat appears on the man's forehead, and he hustled toward the desk to grab his gun. The sound of gunshot through the empty garage, along with that scenes of blood oozing out of Carter's thighs as he struggled backwards.